Hello, guys. Welcome to another episode of Juan Keir Podcast with Unai again.
Once again.
He'll be leaving us soon, unfortunately, but he joined us for this one as well. Today, we are going to discuss revolutions and political violence in general. Like, this obviously has been the nothing ever happens crowd. They're in shambles right now. They're absolutely in shambles. Things are happening. It may not be your side or your people doing the things, but things are happening. And we want to start checking with the what they're calling the Gen Z revolution in Nepal. Kira, you're going to speak more to that since I think you've investigated a little bit more than us both. And then we're going to move to Charlie Kirk's assassination in the U.S. Well, this is about like U.S. political violence, like whether at any point political violence is justified. Spoiler alert for the case of Charlie Kirk. I don't think in that case it was merited.
Or at least to that extent.
To that extent. Like, obviously, like, if someone punched him in the face, I would be laughing my ass off. But it's very different to kill him, right? Because that's the end of the story.
Agreed.
And so, but we'll talk about more of that later. Let's first talk about what they're calling the Gen Z revolution in Nepal and Kathmandu. And if you wanted to explain, like, how you interpret the story here, like, well, what's your read of the situation? Like, what happened?
So, I don't know if firstly we should say it's a revolution, because, I mean, what defines a revolution is kind of hard to pin down in terms of like being objective, because for many people revolution means like a change of government, usually in a violent manner.
Mm-hmm.
If we're trying to be like more systematic about it, it would be a complete upheaval of not only the government, but say the economic system or the social system or cultural system. It doesn't have to be through violence. As of now in Nepal, because there's still it's still recent news.
It's too early to tell what's going to happen.
It's too early to tell, yeah. But from my understanding of the situation is, in Nepal, they've been having problems with the government. They've been having problems with the government for years. Ever since they deposed the monarchy in 2003 and transitioned to a democratic system.
Yeah, like this was like, well, they call themselves at least like Maoist Leninists, right?
Yeah.
In the revolution, and it was still like a communist party. Whether or not, like, I don't understand what was going there economically, but like that's what they call themselves at least. No.
Yeah, but 2003, I'd say it's more a rotation of government power more than an actual idea of democracy itself.
Yeah, but they went away explicitly from a monarchy to
Agreed.
a more, shall we say, in theory, democratic form of government. Ever since then, they've been having problems with, Nepal is a country that is dealing with a lot of economic strife. And in this case, the Gen Z movement have been constantly attacking the idea of political corruption or economic corruption, inequality, and just general problems with standards of living.
Mm-hmm.
But what kicked off this recent turn of events was a viral trend in social media called Nepo Kids, where people in Nepal of young age were showing videos of the lavish lifestyles of the sons or children of leading political figures, such as showing videos of their mansions, kind of glamorous cars. The idea being that these people who have done nothing to earn that kind of lifestyle at the expense of everybody.
Yeah, I saw like a video with like a guy that had like a bunch of like luxury gift boxes as like a Christmas tree, and I think I got a lot of hate, understandably so.
So then that's kind of what started this, I'd say, uproar. I think quite legitimate. It's a legitimate.
Just an uproar.
Definitely call it that.
It's to a certain extent extremely pacifist, because they haven't been going with weapons on the street. It's been more like a general protest. Even there's something quite amazing from this pseudo revolution, how you want to call it, is the fact that you see a lot of people in school uniform going there. Whereas in the past, I'd say that most revolutions, although they came from a big part from the poverty class and from young people, it didn't get to the extent of being literally 15, 14, 16-year-olds.
That's interesting to say, like 14, but like I often like like the revolution movements that I've studied have a lot to do with like usually there's like especially in America it's like the class of blank, you know, like in Venezuela it's like the class of 28 or something that took down like that helped like take down Juan Vicente Gomez, which was one of our many dictators unfortunately throughout the history of Venezuela. And I think like usually the students do have a pretty important role. Like the young people that have energy and some sort of education and an opinion, like they're usually the ones that, you know, they go out in the streets like with you know, they don't have to take care of children yet because they're not married with families.
I agree, but
I
agree, but one thing is the youth itself, 20-year-olds, 19-year-olds, 18-year-olds. Another thing is literally 14, 15-year-olds in school uniform going out. And I think a big reason why these young people came out is because from the Hami NGO, it was NGO created, and it's one of the main supporters of this new Gen Z revolution in Nepal. It was created and organized mainly by youth for the 2015 earthquake. Was it 2015 or 2013?
I'm not sure.
Something like that. It's 2015 earthquake, and pursued from this, it has become quite a circle of power and a circle of pushing for striving for a better future for the youth. And I think that's something that pushed it off the limit of the age limit in comparison to other more modern revolutions, I'd say.
Yeah, I also think it's interesting, and you can't really like talk about this one without the Bangladesh revolution. That was very much a revolution. I mean, I don't know.
That was
I don't really know what's happened. Like,
an uprising would be more kind of militarily violent.
Yeah, but it was like the Bangladesh was very much non-violent, right? They just, I mean, like,
I disagree. It was more non-violence against the government, but against a major amount of the population. A lot of religious minorities were taken to the street, beaten, and killed. So even though against the government itself, it was relatively less aggressive against the minorities and other oppositions from the major Islamic center of the Bangladesh itself. It was pretty
like, obviously, like, I'm like, I don't know about that at all, but like, I was speaking more so about like the way they took like over the offices of government, right? The way that they took over that was interesting, like without much resistance, and this was somewhat similar in the case of Nepal. And it's like some people, like, I've seen some comments, it's like the South Asian Spring kind of thing, and it's like,
to an extent.
Who knows? But it's like, obviously, like, it's interesting in this like completely like international world where we have like all this like images of all these places. I just saw like a YouTube video of this guy who was just like doing tourism, like doing like going from Thailand to the UK in a bike, and he just so happened to be in Nepal for like, and he like basically became an underground reporter. And it's a super interesting YouTube video. I'll post it in the description. And like he just shows like all the images, like people talk to him, explaining to him like their views on like the corruption.
It's great to have first
the lack of opportunities
connection with them.
And I don't really know where we're gonna go exactly with this, but I wanted to mention that like obviously the economy of Nepal was in shambles, right? If you were a young person, you could not find a high paying job. 26% of the economy was remittances. 26%.
That is something I've actually wanted to get more or less deep into it, because even though you're more the historical political expert here, from what I can say of both the economic and the perceived corruption, it's not that bad in comparison to a lot of like general surrounding cities, surrounding states, surrounding areas. Like I agree with you, it was bad, and there was some sort of stagnation. But the inflation rates is like projected inflation rates for this year, I think it was 2.7%, compared to in 2020 and 2019 where it was 7.4%. The debt to GDP ratio is only 50% compared to even like modern countries where there's like more than 100%. And even though there's like 25-26% of those remittances, though that's the money, the money coming from foreign workers that give money back to their families in Nepal. A lot of the big problems is I was looking at that statistics precisely, and it showed that is without counting the underground economy, and
without counting like the black market.
The black market, exactly,
yeah.
And the black market is estimated to be from 60 to 80% of the workers. So it's still great. It's still really big. If you do a head count, it's 7 to 8%, which is still massive in comparison, like compared to many other Asian, Southeast Asian countries, if you want to compare it in that way. But I'd say that the economy and the
weren't as bad as other places.
Exactly, weren't as bad, and also the corruption the CPI, the corruption perception index, was equivalent to other surrounding places like India, like China, like other relatively equal in geography and demographic.
I don't know. The thing is, at least for comparison's sake, I think Somalia has a similar kind of remittance percentage compared to the economy. And I think we can all agree that Somalia
it's not a great example.
It's not the model economic picture. I think the issue with the thing about the remittances is good to have been brought up, because that's kind of in part why these protests have really gone up a notch. So September 4th, so last week really,
Pretty much.
the government passes a ban on 26 social media platforms. Twitter, X, Facebook, WeChat, WhatsApp, and
Instagram,
all these others, right? Because they failed to comply with regulations from the government.
But what they did was basically like they did the law and gave these companies like 1 week to do everything. So it's basically like a ban.
It's an excuse
like,
to
if you did like a 6 month period, that could be like, or like a 3 month period,
and with
even
somewhat flexible.
That would be like
changes.
That would be like, okay, like you're giving these companies time to like keep their businesses open, like that. Obviously, like the stuff they said was like against misinformation and stuff like that, but they did it like after following some like comments that were
if you have that
so obviously like it doesn't look good.
If you have that much of a strict regulation with 1 week period against like something that seems very noble to go against, like misinformation, hate speech, etc., and you do such a stout change, it's not really for misinformation, it's just government control. It's typical excuse.
It's just because of the Nepal kids.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Well,
that's what,
coming back from before.
So that's what caused the original kind of protests to go up. And actually, these protests came out and they undid the ban. Like the government reverted very quickly the ban. But then I think that kind of was one of the last like pieces that was falling into place. Then the protests started to blossom more out, just generally, like anti-government corruption and
anti-elitist and government corruption. Yeah. Yes.
And then a few days ago, this is when like the images we've seen of like mobs of people like starting to burn down buildings is because Nepalese police went to break up a protest, and from what I read, it's 22 or 26 people dead because in conjunction of using rubber bullets, which I mean
they can still kill you.
They're
less lethal, but they can still kill you.
Yeah, but the other problem is they use rubber bullets, which can be lethal. Ideally, they aren't, but they can still be lethal. But the other reports is that they just used live ammunition. They shot into the crowd.
Yeah.
So I think for a lot of people that probably was the last straw, really.
Well, yeah.
Because if you're being shot at, then at that point, why bother even like going for a peaceful protest? You're just gonna get shot and killed.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting to talk a little bit about the more like philosophical, like political, like how acceptable it is part of it, and let's compare it to like other revolutions in the past. Is like do we think that like said violence was justified? I mean, like they killed 20 of them, and as far as we can see, the protesters. They killed a few people. They killed they burned alive the
wife
ex-prime minister's wife. So that's obviously like
that's a pretty
violent.
Did she die from her injuries or not? Because I think I read she.
Oh, maybe she didn't die.
I think there's
she just burned.
There's
I'm not saying
evidence towards it, but it feels like if you can check it, that'll be great. It feels like she was either dead or on her way towards there.
This is the thing. From what I tried to look into it, that fire was for the Prime Minister's house because they see him as obviously
Prime Minister.
Well, yeah, former Prime Minister. He actually resigned, so I mean that's a step. I mean a step in the demands of the.
Yeah.
But she died.
She died. Yeah. She passed away.
I don't know. I'm not condoning it. I'm just saying. From what I understood, there was. Obviously, in a heat of the moment thing, they were burning down like emblems of what they think is the corrupt system, and I think unfortunately she was, because it's her house, she was in it.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was actually like targeted violence. I don't want to quibble over this because I just feel it'll be kind of callous.
Yeah.
But
this is the thing, like, obviously, like, at the time, it's ugly and it's disgusting. Like, it's only time that cements, like, what it is in the zeitgeist. Like, obviously, like, the American Revolution had a lot of deaths. There are probably good people that died in both sides, and most independence wars all over the place. I recently read, like, The Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens, and he really shows really, really well both the complete justification for the uprising of the French people, and yet the horrors the French people did to people that were like, like the petit aristocrat, but also like the people that live with them, like the maids in their households and stuff like that. Like they were suffering too. Like the French Revolution didn't spare, like only kill the evil people and spare the good people, right? And it's like, but at the same time, I would defend the fact that it happened. I think that was an important step towards egalitarianism and humanity, right?
I also feel like it's...
But it's like you can't act like it's not an ugly process.
I also feel like it's generally easier to look at these events in the past.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
And believe that it's not that bad. Like the maybe it was justification, there was causes, because we don't speak about individuals. We speak about this class suffer, these people suffer, and then when we spoke about the wife of the ex-Nepalese prime minister, I think when we speak about her and we say she was burned to death.
Mm-hmm.
Like, damn, that's something that happened. And then probably in the French Revolution, how many people were burned to death?
No,
huge amounts of people.
Thousands, tens of thousands were killed by the guillotine. Like, something crazy like that. And that's what I'm saying. I'm not... Like, obviously, like, every life to some, like, has some sort of value, and we have to believe that as humans. Or else, like, if we don't believe that, then, like...
We're lost.
Yeah, we're lost. Because, like, at the same time, like, anyone can just be killed because it's not important. Right, if our lives have the same value as the food we eat, then like, listen, I've eaten like probably like I've led to the deaths of at least like 30 cows, probably like 3,000 cows, right? And so like, if we start to think in that way that we're completely lost as a species, we have to have like this veneer of like believing that human life is precious, but at the same time, sometimes like violent revolt is required to change things. Ideally, you don't do it through violent revolt, right?
Ideally, you don't do it through violence, and to the minimum amount of violence. Just to what extent can you do it? Especially when you speak about revolutions where the government or the elitists have the military control, such as in the case the French Revolution. You can also see the post-colonial revolutions of Southeast Asia, with either Vietnam Revolution from France, or the Indonesia separating from the Dutch, although that one was decently pacifist in comparison to other ones. But they started they're more bloody, and they started to get power through the revolution once they get their hands on weapons, once they get their hands into power. And it's quite interesting how you would compare the Vietnamese Revolution versus France after getting the weapons from the Second World War, and then some more modern revolutions, where it happens more through the power through social media, the power through the voices being heard, and not necessarily being on the street shooting and being a guerrilla warfare.
That's a good point about how like revolutions have changed over time, or like the way revolutions come about. And I think the three countries we've seen in Southeast Asia that have undergone like mass change in recent years: Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, and Nepal. Versus why have protests of a similar scale, say in other countries, not have caused the same kind of changes? I'm thinking like France, Gilets jaunes. The French.
Well, the United States had a bunch of really big like anti-king protests this year, but they were all peaceful.
Yeah.
Right. Like the No Kings protest.
But that's the thing. These more, I don't want to say advanced, more modernized countries, shall we say.
Mm-hmm.
You can have gigantic protests taking place, and they can't exactly like enforce their demands. I think one reason is because like in modern states, the military and police have now been professionalized. It's much harder.
Yeah, it's much more advanced.
Because I don't know if we were going to talk about the Russian Revolution at some point.
We can definitely talk about that.
I think that's a good idea.
I was like, but it's a like what you're talking about is like a feeling that I've had in some ways. It's like the age of like revolutions dead in countries whose military is so advanced, because it's like the military is so advanced and so well prepared. Like, I don't think that 300 million bodies being thrown against the Pentagon is gonna do anything. Like, I don't know, maybe it will, but just because people won't shoot back.
I feel that the idea is maybe not there may be a correlation between the like militarization and like the well preparedness of the civil guard, or to say it this way, but more the fact that generally the people, like the governments that have these sort of like prepared
they're still more like civil, and like in the sense of like it's still more about speaking than like acting.
Exactly.
Right?
Like,
it's more about
first of all,
like
it's more of a
speech,
speech, and second of all, generally those governments are better organized. They have a better grasp on the political and social
economies
structures.
are probably doing better as well.
The economies are probably doing better. I agree. And then what, like in the anatomy of revolution, just a very important book when speaking about these kinds of matters, one of the most important things is the government's loss of grasp on the system itself. And I feel like it's harder for the governments in the more developed countries to lose grasp, and so it doesn't necessarily have to do 100% with the civil guard, because
the level of technology.
Exactly. Yeah.
But yeah, what do you want to say about the Russian Revolution? If you want to, like,
with the Russian Revolution, I'll try and keep it as short as possible.
It's a very easy topic.
Because we
and see, he's a big fan.
Not only that, but we had an editorial discussion yesterday.
What's that T-shirt? Sorry, what does it say?
Marks and Spencer.
Okay, show it to a camera, please.
Karl Marx and Bud Spencer from the Bud Spencer and Terence Hill films. This is an old reference. You might know it.
You told me about it.
Yeah.
I have a bit of a grasp there.
But you might remember yesterday our editorial conversation, pre-production. We had to say how, like, in some cases, like the Russian Revolution starts over 100 years before the event. We're not going to go that far. We're going to go even more back. No, I'm joking. The prelude, the Russian Revolution, if you're being strict as possible, starts on 1914 really, and then finally blossoms in the October Revolution in 1917, when they kind of impose themselves on power. But the start really begins 12 years before, in 1905, because with the 1917 Bolshevik Revolution started over problems with kind of unstable work conditions and just job availability. The economy was overall doing poorly. Grain prices, so prices for like staple foods such as grain, which means bread, was through the roof. And because of their involvement in the First World War. But not only that involvement causes millions of people to be shot, injured, killed, and they're doing badly in the war. So it's a perfect situation for discontent. But there was a previous revolution attempt in 1905. And before that revolution started violently, there was a peaceful attempt to try and solve the same problems that happened in 1917. An unpopular war, in this case the Russo-Japanese War of 1905, unstable job conditions and rising prices of staple goods. The same outbreak, like sparks that caused the 1917 one. 1905, a Orthodox priest in Moscow starts a peaceful ceremonial-like process in one of their main squares. There's tens of thousands of people, but they're not there out of anger. Well, they are out of anger, but they're not there to
destroy.
What they're doing is a candlelit vigil, and there's tens of thousands of Russian, workers, peasants, all holding candles and pictures of the Tsar, because apparently this was a common thing. When there's problems in Russia, they would go to the Tsar and appeal for his help. Because in Russia, in Imperial Russia at the time, the Tsar was seen in many circles as the little father, who would always be there as a benign figure who would protect and look over. So Father Gapon, charismatic man who genuinely had faith and belief in the Tsar, causes this process to go there peacefully, ask for the Tsar's help, and for some reason, it's still disputed, troops out on the ground shot into the crowd and massacred quite a few of them. It's called Bloody Sunday because of that. So then, of course, if a peaceful protest led by an Orthodox priest who's appealing for the love of the little father to come in and help them, and they get shot upon, people might not see that too favorably.
Of course.
And then over the next few weeks, there's a lot of kind of small-scale violence. And I think one of the images that remains of the failed 1905 revolution, because it didn't start off as a revolution, it started off as a peaceful protest or appeal for help, and then it became a failed attempt at a revolution. It wasn't organized. But one of the images of the aftermath is along one of the railroad tracks, they would hang people's bodies from railroad lines as a message. The Cossacks were known for being very brutal people and like shutting down revolts. So, a lot of people would have that image of that, people being hanged from railway lines for years. Then 1917 comes around, the same situation happens, a mass protest, like general strike kind of levels. This time the army, because half of the army is in, what is now kind of Ukraine and Poland.
In the Western European front.
Yeah, they're in the Western Front. Millions have already died, and now they're kind of scraping the barrel. The people who remain are untrained young people who share the same problems of the
Most
protesters.
Mm-hmm.
And this time they don't have the nerve to shoot them. Instead, when they've received orders to fire on the crowd, there's reports of some of them throwing down weapons and joining the crowd, or in some cases turning around and shooting the officers. At that point, the revolution is really that's when it kind of starts.
It's properly established.
Yeah. So with the revolution,
one question: yeah. Would you say that as we're comparing the importance of a good structured military or civil guard or a good structured government, do you think that it was more important for the government, we want to call it government, Russian government, destructuralization post First World War, or the decrease in the militarization prowess of the civil guard that led to the point of the Bolshevik Revolution?
If like you force me to pick one.
If I force you.
If you force me to pick, I'll probably say the government. But with the Russian Revolution, it's a case of every single factor. Like
you can't isolate.
Yeah, you can't isolate.
But I think it's interesting to compare it.
Yeah, it's always like in all these things, it's always like many factors all coming together, and like when you have like a popular uprising, you almost have to have like general issues and a history of them, because it's like you're pitching a very wide tent, right? Mm-hmm. You're getting as many people involved as possible in the revolution. And I think that this is a little bit what I meant, like since the dawning of like more and more dangerous weapons, you require more and more people to rise up, right? Because it's like one guy with a sword can fight off like two guys without a sword, basically, at most. But like one guy with a gun, he could shoot like 5.
With a tank?
One guy with an AK, he can shoot like 100 or more. Depends on the distance, right? But like, and it goes like that. So it's like the amount of people that you need. And so like
also,
throughout modern history,
compared to the not only like the thing they have, but the comparison to the revolution itself, because again the Southeast Asian revolutions, getting their hands on weapons for the Second World War, and then being able to rise against the elitists and the government, the colonialist government itself, because they got their hands onto those weapons.
And that's kind of like what I feel like sadly the reality is like there is such a thing as mob justice, and honestly in general, like whether we would like to like live by it or not, we kind of do live by it. We live by like what the majority thinks is correct, right? If 90% of people thought that like certain war, like Russia was justified in attacking Ukraine, then that would be like what people would justify as like, well, that's like justified violence. Whether or not it's actually justified, like the way that we do it as humans is like what the majority thinks. And so what I was going through is like, I think it's really, really important that especially in modern societies where there's like so much dialogue all the time because of social media, that like if you do political violence and revolution, that it has to be like a widely like 70% plus percent of the population that would agree with this, because I
It's
feel like
it's
anything
easier,
else.
It's easier to reach the population nowadays than before.
Yeah, but like it also depends. Like I feel like a lot, especially in Europe and the U.S., like countries are so divided politically
Okay, I agree.
and polarized. Where like if one side did a revolution, it would almost certainly be war,
And also
like civil war,
and
because it's like it's not like everyone agrees
also I feel that
on the same things.
I feel that historically, both in like especially First, Second World War and posterior from that, please correct me if I'm wrong because you are the history expert, as we just said. There's a tendencies of governments from these regions to spark revolutions outside in order to get some sort of control. And then when there is some sort of revolution or some sort of intense change, such as I think it was in Bulgaria, they pretty much vetoed an extreme right party like the.
You mean Romania?
Romania, sorry,
Romania,
my
yeah.
bad. Romania. They like kind of suppress one another's revolutions to put it that way. So it's not only like the individual countries' stoutness and strength and government body and the 70% having the power, 80% whatever number you want to put, but also the fact that the countries themselves support each other to try and decrease revolutions. What would you say there?
I mean,
I think these days it's happening for sure.
There has been an increase in, I'd say, the last 60 something years of proxy revolutions or proxy attempts to incite unrest, and
within
from foreign countries into like the target countries, they'll try and
in general. Okay,
yeah.
I see.
So I mean, a few cases would be not only of inciting revolutions, but in many other cases is actually foreign support to counter revolutionaries.
Yeah, of course.
So I mean, you've got with earliest example
Russian mercenaries. You have Americans sending weapons.
Well, I was going to say more actually in the post-Bolshevik Revolution. There's the Russian Civil War with the white faction or the remnants of imperial government being supported by the US, France, and the UK, and they've received a lot of like armaments, including tanks.
It was interesting how at the beginning, I feel like some of those countries supported more the initiation of the revolutions because they wanted a weaker Russia. And then once there was a change,
No, because at the time when the revolution started, Russia is still fighting. And then Lenin's policy, one of his promises when he was trying to gather support was, we'll get out of this war, because obviously it's not to our benefit. Of course, for the UK and France, this is a disaster, because suddenly Russia leaves. That means the entire German army that's there.
Then I was modeled up. It was the post the war. They wanted they were funneling funds to the White Army in order to instill this political unrest and division within Russia itself.
It's not to instill unrest. It's to try and stop the
rise of communism.
Yeah, they for much of Western Europe, the Bolsheviks or the Soviets became kind of an existential threat to the eyes of the rich ruling class, because for them they see this one of the largest countries in the world which is a reliable ally in a sense for them. They suddenly see it's collapsing violently, and they fear it will. If they survive, they might try and export, whether it be deliberately or just simply because they serve as an image to other people. Like, if they can do it, we can do it.
Yeah,
here.
of course.
It happened. It happened in Asia.
Fire, yeah.
Like
it went through the other way, not.
Yeah.
Yeah, like China and everything.
Thankfully for us.
Chinese Civil War. The Mao was fighting against the Kuomintang, which would be nationalist China, which is now like the heirs of nationalist China is
the
Taiwan.
island of Taiwan, yes.
And the KMT still remains.
Yes, they are. Apparently, they still have terms that they are in a civil war, and that way, because if there's like separation, they have the right, or like proposed pact of right, to be able to attack each other. But by the latest moves of China, maybe they aren't going to care too much about this in the coming years.
Mao Zedong's communists in the Chinese Civil War, where. Well, sorry, the Kuomintang was receiving support from the US to like try and keep them in the fight. This then changed with the Second World War because it's suddenly like all the warlords in China made a temporary agreement to stop fighting each other to fight the Japanese. But again, a case of a revolutionary movement, or in this case, the counter-revolutionaries being supported by foreign powers. Civil war in Angola in the 80s, that was a lot of people. Cuba was arming the MPLA, like the rebels. Meanwhile, I think I don't know if I'm wrong, but I think the US and the Soviet Union were collaborating unofficially to keep the local power. Sometimes
can't correct you there.
You know way more about history.
There's some conflicts are so confusing that people who are in theory opposed powers will be on the ground supporting the same movement, but they might not admit it because either they don't know or they don't want to care.
Yeah, actually, speaking about all this financing the base of revolutions and financing those who push the revolutions or on the contrary the remaining powers is quite interesting in the case of Nepal's revolution, because I was having more of a deep search into Hami Nepal, the NGO organization that I mentioned before, that is the leader of this Gen Z revolution in Nepal. And quite interestingly, lately, the last few years, there's been increasing donations of two parties, not political parties, but
civil societies.
No, well,
it's
one of them being
entities.
Entities, exactly. One of them being Infinity Holdings, which is an arms dealer, and they had some problems in Nepal because they bought some guns from an Italian brand Beretta, 4 times the price, paid by the government, and they took the other thing, typical thing. And then the other one, the Shankar Group, which first of all they are kind of already shady themselves because they had another similar problem with buying overpriced COVID-19. I don't know if it was tests. I think it was thermal guns, so the fever measuring devices. They bought them overpriced, and apparently they took some of the money, and that was for the government, etc. And for whatever reason, they have been smuggling. They have been weaponizing the police and the National Guard. They had started contract a few years ago, and they are one of the main contributors right now of this Hami Nepal. So two important arms dealers, two important weaponization systems of the police and the civil guard itself have put money into this revolution.
When you say weaponizing, do you mean they're supplying arms?
They're supplying arms.
They're supplying arms to the people or to the government?
To the government, to the police.
And yet they're also giving money to the people.
Exactly.
I mean, I guess it's there's the whole industry is war's business, we make guns, we need wars to sell guns.
Well, but isn't the point more not that they're just selling arms, which is morally dubious, but it's graft at this point?
Sorry, though?
You're saying they're selling, you said with the Italian Beretta company, they're selling guns at 4 times the actual price?
They bought the guns at 4 times the price from Beretta, Italian company. It's more to show that not only are they weapon dealers, that also have a point of interest in Nepal because they sold the weapons to the government itself, but also they are quite sketchy because they use government funds, they bought them at pro price and everything. But both of them, at the end of the day, are one of the intermediates from buying weapons from other countries and giving it to the Nepalese government, to the Nepalese police and the Nepalese...
that's what I was asking. It's a case of graft at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Just confirming. Because we care about facts.
We care about facts.
We do, that is the number one issue in this channel. It is facts. We can be wrong, we can be incorrect, but we will try to get all the facts.
I have done my research. I have a lot of notes here.
But I mean, I guess it's we've been running long a little bit, and so the more important discussion that I want to have is obviously not all revolutions we would say are justified. I myself in Venezuela, and I don't think the coup d'etat that Chavez did in 91 was at all justified. And then after he was voted into power in 99, he ruined the country for the next half century at least. Well, maybe not. Maybe only quarter century.
Maybe more.
Maybe more. Maybe,
I'm sorry, man.
Maybe more. Maybe more. But in that sense, obviously, the revolution is only as good as what comes after, right? It's only as good as what you institute later after that. So you can't be the violence itself is it's an end. No, it's a means, right? And it's and it can be a means, can be a terrible means to very good ends. And even that it can be but like yeah, it's a difficult thing we have to confront. Where like if the revolutions increase and political violence increases, by all metrics, it seems like it's happening in the world. Like, how do we recognize like the ones that are helpful versus the ones that aren't, right? Like the ones that are gonna lead to worse lives for everyone versus the ones that are gonna lead to better lives for everyone.
I have a great way of separating the possibilities.
How would you do that?
You go 10 years, 15 years, 20 years into the future and look back. Because I feel like it's so hard to be able to see which revolution is going to be positive, which revolution is going to be negative. Like even in if you took the ideas of the typical revolutions or of the Middle East, Arab Spring, the Islamic Revolution, you would say in Iran itself.
I have a few measurements. If they're a military person, 90% of the time, bad.
You think so?
Yeah.
I think with Franco it works super good.
If they're a military person,
it's a joke.
Usually it's gonna be either some sort of fascism or some sort of graft. That's my number one belief. I mean, like, I feel like you have to have people that are like educated and in some way. Obviously, like idealism can be bad. Like, I would call Hitler idealistic, for example.
Agree.
And so like you have to be someone that believes what they say, but what they believe is good.
And it's
what they believe is good, and in my opinion also pluralist, because I'm like, we live in such complicated worlds that you almost have to be pluralist.
I think if you have a common sense idea, you understand there's going to be people that think different than you, look different than you, and it's better to institute a future in which everybody can work together. I mean, that's pretty much common sense.
Exactly.
I'm just saying the obvious.
And I was like, in this sense, I like when we choose or not to revolt, I think like going back to like this, you have to have the majority. I think especially of the US, of like, the US is pretty much 50-50 on like party distribute. Well, like it's like 35-35, and then there's people in the middle that swing, right? But it's very polarized, number one. And like what's happening there were like the rising violence, like the death of the Minnesota senators, and like there's been like, if you look at the actual data, there's been more violent by the right than by the left. Like the left has like Luigi Mangione killing the corporate person. It has I wouldn't call the assassination of Trump the left, because that was like a Republican kid.
Yeah,
like,
I would,
that was like a weird thing.
I think to be fair to
I would also
we just exclude him because it's the Trump failed assassin. I think he's like, the data that's come from him is so
his like political is like, he was like very right wing in some senses, is maybe like different in some others. But like what I heard is like, he was like a pro gun, like super kind of like insane kid in this way. But that's not like,
no, I would actually want to give some information about the Minnesota state legislature.
Yeah, sure.
Like one of them survived, the other one passed away. Vance Bolter was the man that perpetrated these assassinations, and he was actually appointed in 2019 for the Minnesota Advisory Board for Democrats. So it's more like he was working for them, and even though he had some extremist views, because it's very weird for
was a Trump voter, like his family
exactly, like he was working for the Democrats, and he was theoretically helping for them, but then he had some anti-abortion ideas, and he the past show that he has voted in the past for Democrats and also for Republicans. So it's kind of
it's complicated. You can't say,
it's very complicated.
But like the entire point is like, at least like more Democrats have been victimized than Republicans in this case. Like obviously, like Charlie Kirk was a Republican that was victimized. I would still like hesitate to ascertain the exact reason, because they haven't even caught the guy. They really don't even know like why he shot him, right? And I think, but in general, like, the thing is, like, if you increase violence in a place that's so polarized, we're not gonna get revolution. We're not gonna get like the change that we need.
You get civil war.
We're gonna get civil war or super authoritarianism.
Yeah.
Right. We're either gonna get the current government cracking down on everyone, and they're already doing it with like the migration.
Agree.
So it's like they kind of. I almost feel like they want to do it. Like with something like the police, like the military police to LA, DC, Chicago. Well, they haven't sent to Chicago yet, but they've been threatening to. And in my opinion, you can't up the temperature, because it's not like, you're not gonna all go for the top or all go for people that have fucked up your country. You're gonna go to each other, and that's such a dangerous place that the U.S. is in right now. And I want to say that like, I was never like the biggest fan of Kirk. I think that he has some horrible opinions. I think that maybe at best he's some sort of like true believer grifter simultaneously. I don't know how that's possible, but like getting money in, but also saying like he said something like the civil rights movement was a mistake. Like actually, man, he said like empathy is like a new age term that like doesn't. Like he said like awful
not
shit.
the civil rights movement. He said the Civil Rights Act of 1965,
Right.
which is worse.
My bad.
No, but I mean,
like you could say that the movement had like some problems, but like
you can say that, but the Civil Rights Act was what allowed people to have voting rights and other.
Regardless, we could enumerate all the things that we disagree with Charlie Kirk, but the issue is that one thing, like the reaction from there's been a leftist like reaction that's obviously been like laughing at him and stuff like that,
and people saying that that it was his fault because he was saying such.
But it hasn't been the leaders of the political parties.
Of course,
like the but the same's not gonna be true for the right.
No,
when I go to the right, right is not on this side.
I haven't said that it was on the other way. I was saying that.
But what I'm saying is like you say of course, like oh of course they didn't say horrible, but like we'll get to that later. But like. Like even the Democratic Socialist Bernie Sanders is like, this is horrible. Like this is a country of speaking where we talk to each other, we change each other's minds, and it's like, and we do change through dialogue and through like disagreeing with each other. And it's like how to disagree correctly and respectfully is so important to a modern civilized society that it's like in the nerve.
However, question. Sorry, I'll let you finish and then I'll ask the question.
Yeah. However, Donald Trump, before knowing who shot him. Before having any evidence, it's like this is the consequence of the right, like the left-wing demonization, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a bit. But like the left-wing demonization, and basically like people like him or like Asmund Gold are saying like, oh, only when this happens to the left and their leaders are they going to understand what we're going through. That's basically a threat or like a promise. Right?
What was
maybe like a threat, but it's like saying that like, oh, you have to go through this now because we went through this.
And one question: what was the? I know a bit about the facts from the act itself of the Minnesota state legislator assassination. Mm-hmm. What was the reaction of the right? Because I don't feel
the reaction of the right was saying that Elon Musk was saying that he was
none, and at worst, and in many cases, openly like blatant taunting and gloating.
Even then, a mixture of things. Like even like some of the right was trying to paint this that the guy was a Democrat because he was appointed by Waltz, like to like a government job.
I think it was more of a it's.
But man, you can appoint someone to a job that you like didn't vote your way. I think that's like
I agree.
I think voting, like obviously the guy probably voted for other people that weren't Trump in the past. Like most people voted for Obama in 2012 and most people voted for Trump. So there's in 2024. So there's obviously going to be some voted for both people. Mm-hmm. But what I mean is like, that it's like, that like they were very much like either didn't care enough or like they were, let's say, the least they were not anti-inflammatory. Mm-hmm. They weren't saying like, oh, this has to stop. Mm-hmm. Like the killing of politicians is wrong. They were not saying that stuff. And of course, like you've heard Trump speak. He's the divider in chief. No. He's the first guy who speaks.
Divide again and again.
But yeah, he literally all his enemies, all his like political enemies are evil, and like the immigrants are poisoning the blood of the country. Like textual things he said. Right?
I know. I've read them myself.
I wish I was being I wish I was being hyperbolic because it's so sad that I'm not being hyperbolic.
And also like not only the base ideas of humanism and just like political correctness and trying not to add more wood into the fire with the last Charlie Kirk's assassination, but also I feel like he's losing a lot of support in the libertarian support that he had because of Elon Musk, especially because of the whole the tariffs and the whole ideas that he's doing it at. So maybe there's going to be a bigger shift in the.
I mean, he's losing popularity and everything, but like my one thing is like there's just a group of people, unfortunately, in the U.S. that are very, very misinformed. And actually, Charlie Kirk was one of the people that helped do that. He was like one of the big proponents about the election being stolen in 2020. And
and he's a proponent of the Great Replacement theory.
Which if you don't know, it's like the thing that white people think that they're being replaced by the other races. Which
and
obviously,
it's being done
intentionally
by,
is crazy.
being done by the people in power.
Yeah, exactly. Obviously,
that's
not
the idea.
like
Because you can see to an extent that some population
Yeah,
changes in different
there's
countries.
just race mixing.
Exactly.
And people mixed race aren't considered white.
Yeah, and if
That's like-
white people have less children and there's immigrants
exactly.
coming and they have more children,
Let's
it's
say people have more
not
children.
like the big bad hand
Yeah,
moving everything.
it's exactly. It's just what's happening because of economic and social forces in that case. But what I'm saying is like, this is a very dangerous place, and what has to happen is that responsible people in the center, and in my opinion, the Democrats have been pretty responsible, at least when it comes to trying to like lower down political violence. Like, the right has to break with Trump. Like,
I think
the responsible right wing has to break with Trump. I don't know how many of those we have left in the US, but man, you have to actually start doing this, and you can't work with the guy that's like putting kerosene in the fires of like polarization. Because yes, there's a lot of like passionate Trump fans, but that's going to destroy the country.
I agree with you, especially in the latest things you just said, like the latest phrase. I would say, however, that it's also easy to look at a certain point in time and say this person has been more in the inflammatory one, or this other person. And I feel like if you like see the general scope, I would agree 100% that both Trump and right now the Republican extremists have been the most inflammatory ones. Also, there have been deaths from Kirk and everything, but that was also kind of the position of many Republican-minded people after Black Lives Matter. They were saying that a lot of the Democratic Party and a lot of the leaders of the Democratic Party were putting more wood into the fire, not only because they wanted to push more violence, or not only because they think they wanted to push more violence into the streets, but also because if they didn't get behind this movement, they would lose votings and they would lose power.
But I would say that that's, from my experience living there in the US, that it's mostly erroneous. I would say that 90% of Democrats were like, police still matter, we're not ACAB. Obviously, you have the dumb socks, like the Democratic Socialists being a little bit more ACAB and things like that. And so obviously you have those people, but they're a minority of the Democratic voice. And I would say that, in my opinion, like maybe those people weren't condemned enough for saying stupid shit like, oh, there should be no police. Because obviously that's stupid. There has to be a police.
Yeah.
But like, in my opinion, I don't think that they were inflaming like police violence against the police. They were just saying like, oh, we should defund them and fund other things like helping communities.
I don't mean exactly. I don't mean exactly that.
So I don't.
But I don't mean exactly that position from the Black Lives Matter ideology. I meant more like the revolts that were happening at that point.
Well, but that was like ground led. That wasn't top led. Where there's a difference.
I agree.
There's a difference. I will agree that like anyone who riots has to be put in jail, right? But that's not like, we don't have like AOC saying like, hey, go out there and break and steal from Target, you know? She never said loot Target, you know?
Costco, not
or
Target.
it's like, oh, the owners of Target, they're destroying this country. She didn't say that. Like, I mean, like, I guess I was thinking about billionaires in general, and I guess you could like,
well, I think
do it like go to that, but she wasn't advocating for direct violence against
I agree.
specific people.
I think with like the Black Lives Matter protest and then riots in some cases throughout 2020, there's a lot to be said that can be said with kind of weight, that the handling of the protests and the subsequent riots were underplayed,
mismanaged.
There's good cases to be made there, and I think it's a valid point to say that you could agree with like the sentiment and then not agree so much with how it played out.
Mm-hmm.
Completely agree.
But this is the thing, that this happens, right? And I do believe to some extent that there's a valid case to be made. However, the party that is then who came back to power, who is known for running on law and order, is a party run by a convicted felon who incited not a riot, an insurrection, which the punishment is treason, as far as I remember.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Then pardoned those people.
Mm-hmm.
Said there's no wrong.
No, yeah, obviously it's justice
for
justice like for me, but not for thee.
Yeah, of course. He's gonna do that over the grade. Could I? Well,
sorry, just to bring it back, like finish it off quickly. With the comments of nowadays, people saying like it's inflammatory. They're trying to like bait us out, like from the right. Because I've seen Asmongold Nick Freitas, who's in Congress right now, released a video yesterday, which I think borders on like stochastic terrorism, because he's saying we will come for you.
Oh yeah. I've read those.
But what I saw yesterday or the day before yesterday was Meghan Kelly, was I think co-worker and friend of Kirk. When she found out about the news, obviously she was, devastated. And then she published later on Twitter like a message in the same vein of like as Mongol, like this is the last time we'll tolerate this. We should never be like making fun of people's death. Someone responded to her with evidence, like a screenshot
of her making fun of somebody else's death.
Well, but it wasn't like a few years ago, because like there's always that thing of like, if they said something 5 years ago. No, it was from this year, on the anniversary of George Floyd's mortality,
yes.
where she said, congratulations to George Floyd for achieving 5 years of sobriety.
I don't know if that was Meghan Kelly. I saw like another guy. I saw that before another guy, but I don't know.
I think that tweet was put by a lot of people.
Yeah, maybe like other people reposted it and stuff.
So
like that.
I get that. I get that. You can say like, like polarization is kind of a tango that two people play, but in this case, one side of this dance troupe or tango is someone who occasionally missteps and or maybe sometimes not even missteps, does it deliberately, but the other side is constantly doing it to such an extent, and it's not just like people from the ground, because of course we can say but it's like random people. I'm not, that's no excuse, but you can say it's like out of their control. No, it's like all the people who are systematic,
in
like
the center of the leading figures in the center of the government itself. Yeah,
they're doing.
I would, if possible, like to ask a question a bit in comparison, and like maybe to tie it up to the ideas of revolution. Maybe we can see the inflammation provided by Charlie Kirk's death as obviously like extremely irresponsible to a great extent, and then see maybe like Black Lives Matter movement was in a lesser extent, both in terms of violence and both in terms of the objective and the changes done, as a little French Revolution, in the sense that there was some violence, but maybe the end was a more noble one than simply use somebody's death for the inflammatory division of a country, and in order to increase government control on the population.
Yeah, I definitely think that like I'm afraid that they're gonna use this as an excuse to tighten the screws even more. And I mean, let's not forget that Charlie Kirk was a very adamant supporter of like everything that the Trump administration is doing,
he
which
wore
includes
hats, of course,
which includes like the unprompted invasion of cities like LA and DC for basically no reason. Like obviously DC is not crime less, but it's not invading Houston, which is crime filled in Texas, because obviously it would be very unpopular for him to send troops to Texas, because like they're keeping the division.
He's not going to send troops to Republican places.
Yeah, exactly. It's not going to happen. He's not going to send it to Utah after this. But like, what I mean is like one thing that the right has said is like, oh, this is like the natural result of calling people like Kirk Nazis. First of all, we still don't know who shot him and why. Put that in the
that is something important to say.
Number one thing to say, it's irresponsible to say why it happened before we know. But number two is like, I think like this thing where people don't want to be called Nazis is like they think that the word Nazi means like inhuman monster. And in some ways it does. But like I think that the most important thing that is like really hard to accept is that we can't forget that the Nazis were humans. Like they were people. Like most of them were regular fucking people.
With a lot of support from the people from their own country.
Exactly. And then they like the culture worsened to a point where they became very, very bad people that killed 6 million like Jews and then started world wars, right? So it was terrible, but you can't forget that it's in the capacity of every human to eventually be there. And so we can't ignore it when people that are ostensibly on our side are saying things that are very, very problematic, fascistic. In my opinion, a lot of the things that Charlie Kirk was saying were fascistic. Whether or not he's a Nazi that wants to kill the Jews, I don't know. I don't know the guy. I don't know him well. But like, well, I didn't know him. Sorry. But it's like, sorry. I shouldn't joke. It's bad. But it's like, but what I'm saying is like, we can't be like minimizing the effects of speech, in the sense that it's not as bad as violence. Violence is worse than speech. But speech can lead to violence. Obviously, like all of Hitler's violence started by his enemistizing of the Jew. Like he said, like, oh, these are the people that are ruining our country. These are the people that are doing this. And then they did the violence. And so, like, whether or not the violence would have come after from people like Kirk or Trump, and in my opinion, the violence has started in many cases against the immigrants, like, whether or not it's going to get there, we have to stop it way before it gets there.
I would like to say it's not that it's starting. It has started for a long time. 54 cases of, I think, domestic terrorism in the US have referenced Trump by name explicitly.
Well, yeah, but I would
like
if it's not the states doing it, right? To me, the worry, obviously, like the gun problem and the like terrorism problem is a problem. But once it's the state itself doing it, you're very fucked because the state has a lot more resources than random militia.
The thing is, the people can be regulated by the state. The state is rarely regulated by the state itself. These excuses or these successes that happen, or like not successes, but like these problems that are occurring, should be treated very carefully, because if you support increasing restriction regulations, such as sending the National Guard to blue states and blue state cities, because obviously not to Houston itself, and you accept this as a positive step forward towards control, there's two things to be taken into account. First of all, you're giving probably the most powerful entity in your country more power to make those like even more rash decisions. And second of all, even if you support this from your point of view, you have to take into account that if there's new elections and the other party
in the good scenario where there's new elections,
exactly,
it could go to the other person.
It could go to the other person, and you could be the victim right there. So like even thinking about it in an extremely selfish, arrogant way, there's going to be consequences for you too. So it's not only important to stop these new regulations and power struggles from the beginning in countries like the United States, but also not only doing it for the sake of stopping power, but maybe as a selfish way.
The irony is like what everything you're saying is fair, is very accurate observation of like the increasingly authoritarian and cult of personality in the White House. But in some cases, there's an opposite problem. These things usually go hand in hand. It's just in very different areas. Right now, the FBI is led by a hack who has no qualifications for one of the most prestigious law enforcement agencies in the world. They've defunded it. They've fired veteran agents and case managers.
Same with the Pentagon, something similar.
Yes, basically at every level of government.
Yeah. So they gutted one of the most well-staffed, well-funded, and most capable police agencies in the world. Now it turns out that I think it's kind of obvious with the Utah Valley shooting, the FBI doesn't seem to know what they're doing. They took 2 people into custody. They claimed that those were the suspects, and then they released them 2 hours later.
I think that's happened more in the past, but I agree that there's a lot of power and grasp from these areas.
The FBI in the past would never get a suspect in such a case like this and blatantly like announce the word. We got him.
I can't disagree with that because it's just something that happens.
Patel's just wildly unprepared for the job.
They're wildly
so ironically, if they had just left the FBI to their devices, because obviously the problems with the FBI that the Trump administration has was that they always were
investigating them, being investigated by them.
They said, if we defund them, defund the police, ironically. If we defund them, we won't have to worry about them anymore. It's like, oh wait, actually we do need the FBI. It's like,
defund the FBI and fund the ICE and the military. That's a great idea.
But like everything you said before, like authoritarianism is inconsistent. Like they do things on a whim, really. They don't like institutions because institutions
only the ones that have power.
Well, they like their institutions, right? Like the moment that there's like people in there that they don't do, fired.
But they don't like institutions generally because institutions are kind of independent. They have their own like force. They can. That's why checks and balances is such a nice idea. Because if one part of the government goes on a wild rampage and just decides to ignore everything.
If there's separation of power, there's a way to control it.
But now that kind of out of the 3 branches of the U.S. government, like only Congress is somewhat, shall we say, like independent. because the Supreme.
It's hard to say. It's somewhat independent.
Well, but independent from the others.
In compared to the other areas.
Or independent to the ideology.
Okay. Yeah. Then yes.
We're going pretty long, so I'm gonna try to start wrapping this up.
That sounds good.
But I kind of want to wrap it up with like, okay, so this is why everything's bad and burning. Now, how do we think that like you start doing this to fix it? Obviously, there's what politicians should do, but then there's what like people should do.
Mm-hmm.
And now, like my like a lot of people are saying right now that Charlie Kirk like wasn't scared to talk to people, and he was like talking to everyone on campus, which is great. And I'm like, listen. Sure, he was talking to people, but the way he was talking to people was a bad way to talk to people. Because like there's this debate bro culture, and I watched this South Park episode that said it better, like master debater. It's just like, but it's like the master debater.
What do you mean with that?
Yeah, I know, but the master debater is a terrible boy because like, these people they seek wins, they seek victory when they're having debate instead of seeking dialogue and like truth by talking to people at the same level. And sorry, like some construction has started, so we're gonna really wrap up right now. So I was saying, it's like when you talk to people, and you should talk to people that you disagree with, you should do it in the form of a conversation. Don't seek to change their mind. Just talk to them.
Yeah,
talk to them.
It's not a year 12 debate in which you have to show how good your point is, but you have to look at the problem with a pragmatic idea and try to understand that you're probably right in some cases, but you're probably wrong in many others.
Yeah. Anything
in many cases, like the only way to change people's minds is to actually understand. I think Foucault said that all disagreement stems from a misunderstanding of language, in the sense that for many people, if you say what is safety, everybody will understand what safety means, but like for how you arrive to that, two people can have very different conclusions. For some people, safety means like complete safety, like no threats whatsoever. For others, safety can mean relative safety, but then also conditioned with like relative freedom, because like safety without liberty just means tyranny. But of course, if you speak to two people and say, how would you want to bring about more security and safety, and you don't understand, they're going to come to the debate, not to the debate, also to like the agreements and policy with very different ideas, and there's no way you can reconcile without understanding it first.
Yeah. Well, obviously we could talk ages about this topic because it's like a historical, very important topic, which will never not be relevant to human history.
We've compressed the Russian Revolution,
we've talked so much
Nepal, Charlie Kirk, extremism in the US in just 1 hour and probably 10 minutes, 5 minutes, I don't know how much.
Yeah, around there.
Good to wrap it up right now.
So yeah, and obviously like we're getting close by the construction workers in the next apartment. So thank you very much for watching this whole video all the way through. I mean, if you made it here, you watched it all the way through, but it's very impressive because it's more than an hour. And so, really appreciate it. If you have anything to comment, you want to ask us, or like put in the comments below. Like obviously, as we were saying right at the end there, we want this to be a conversation. We don't want to tell you what you should think. This is all about learning. It's not about learning like for like you, but also for us, right? This is a process where like there's so many things that I don't know about history, and that's why I invite you guys, because you're very studied guys, and it makes it so worth it to like be in this conversation. And hopefully the people that watch this feel the same way. And we'll see you in the next one. So yeah, peace. Hi guys, here at the end of the video, because we filmed this on Friday, and obviously the shooter has been arrested already, and we have more information about him. His exact political leaning are still very unclear. Obviously, one salient fact is that he had a trans partner. And apparently this partner collaborated with the FBI in some way. I'm not sure if it was forced or whatever, but it's immaterial. There's also some signals that say that he might be part of the Groyper group, but I don't really want at this point to assign blame to any single group, because we still need more information. I would personally love like the release of like his YouTube history and his consumption habits online, because I think they would be really, really important to educate, like, is this guy just an exception, or are there certain groups or like, you know, societies out there, or like cultures that are advocating for more and more violence? And if there are, we need to know which cultures they are, and, you know, try to nip that in the butt, you know, not in the, you know, shooting them wherever they are, but like arresting people that have committed crimes, and obviously having knowledge about where this kind of stochastic terrorism can come from. And so, yeah, I just wanted to provide that update because if you were consuming this news through our video, then you wouldn't have been up to date. Again, as I mentioned in the video, as we talked in the podcast, like regardless of the ideology, further political violence is obviously only gonna do further political violence. These are cycles, because like when one group perceives themselves to be attacked physically, then they will be more likely to attack other people violently, right? And so because of that, the first thing that we should do is simply discontinue and all of us condemn the attacks, and condemn further violence. And obviously, like, you can argue which ideas led to this issue, and I think that it is something that we should discuss. We should discuss which ideas have led to this, but we have to be more thorough than just like the 3 or 4 pieces of evidence that we've seen. Obviously, like, people are complicated. You can be someone that's like ethno-fascist, but also like pro-trans. It's a weird group of people, but they exist. If you are on Twitter, you know that basically every single political ideology mix can exist. And basically we need to find out first more information about what the motives were, and keep an eye on those societies, on those ideas, and like whether or not they're actually promoting violence in this way. And although obviously I have very big opinions on who's doing most of the political violence in the US and for which reasons and which leaders are to blame most, because I'll say this, like, without a single doubt in my mind, I think that the leftist Twitter that is like making fun of Charlie Kirk and stuff like that, I understand the catharsis that such a thing could bring, like someone that you dislike so heavily, maybe even hated, dying violently. But I am glad to notice that none of the leaders of the Democratic Party or any liberal or liberal to left serious party in the world has been completely celebrating this, and that obviously all political violence when we live in civilized societies should be condemned. And yeah, I guess that's just what I want to talk about, give an update, because you need to be informed. All right, thank you.